Hi, today we're going to talk about mounting plants. And people wonder why we do that. Well, mounting plants is a very good way to grow epiphytes. Epiphytes are plants that live on trees. They don't take food from the tree like a parasite would. They just use the tree for support. A lot of the plants that we like to grow came from the rainforest. And in the rainforest, there's a high canopy. And then that canopy blocks the sun from the ground. So if you're a slow-growing small plant like orchids and bromeliads are, they cannot get light on the ground of the rainforest. So they have evolved to live up in the trees where the light is available to them. And so with every organism, people, animals, plants, fungus, whatever, the closer you can simulate how they exist naturally, the better chance of success you're going to have. So plants that are living in a tree, of course, will benefit from being mounted. Now, it's also a natural way to grow plants. It looks more real in the pot. After all, plants are grown in pots in nature. And so it gives you a better feel for how the plants would really live and look like in the natural world. It also gives you an outlet for creativity. There's a lot of things you can do mounting. We're going to show a few of them here and talk about a few others towards the end of this talk. And I think you'll enjoy and see the fun of mounting your plants. The other advantage is for people like me who have a whole lot of plants, you run out of bench space after a while. This way you can mount them, hang them up, and they save you a little room on the benches in your greenhouse or in your garden. Now, there are a lot of advantages to mounting. The first one is you don't have to repot them. Most orchids and other plants have to be repotted after a few years because the mix breaks down. And if you have them mounted, the mount will last for a long time. And so you don't have to mess with annual or biannual repotting. Also, one of the things that I've noticed in the years I've been doing this is one of the number one cause of death of orchids and such is overwatering. And because of the way mounting is done, it's much harder to overwater your plant. The third one is it looks very interesting. It's very pretty. And so we're going to show, when you see how it's done, you'll see how pretty it really looks. Now, there are disadvantages. One of the disadvantages is that you have to water just about every day. So if you have your plant up against the wall or something, you're going to have to take it off the wall because you don't want to get your wall all wet, and take it to your kitchen sink or wherever to water it. And if you're going away for extended periods of time, you're going to have to arrange for somebody to water the plants for you. The other one is they will sometimes, if the plant grows for a long time, it'll outgrow its mount. And getting an orchid or a bromeliad off of its mount can be very, very difficult. A lot of times people will just put the mount that's on top of a bigger mount. And plants do grow quickly. One of our clients in Menlo Park had a staghorn fern on a very large mount. The plant grew so big it started to expand and started to grow into the side of his house. You don't want that. Okay, there are a lot of different materials that we need to mount plants. First thing we're going to need is the mounting medium. We think to mount it on. This is one of the most popular ones. This is excuse me. This is cork oak bark. Now the cork is very good because it lasts a long time. It doesn't break down, and you can break it into any size or shape you want, or cut it into any size or shape you want. The other thing you're going to have to use is we have things like driftwood. It can be used. This is chala, which has a lot of possibilities, and also tree fern bark. Now, I'm going to mount a plant to show you how it's done. And this is an orchid, and this is a piece of bark which has been cut to about the right size. Now, when you're doing orchids, you'll see that the orchid starts out with small leaves and then gets bigger and taller ones. So you're going to want to mount the plant so that it's going to follow the piece of wood that you're mounting it to. First thing you do is you get yourself some fishing line, because this is clear, it's monofilament, It's very easy to work with, and you make yourself a slip knot like this so that you have a loop. And you take the loop and you place it over the piece of bark. This will give you a start so you don't have to fight with it. Then you place your plant with a little bit of sphagnum moss. Now this is sphagnum moss. You notice I'm wearing gloves. And the reason I wear gloves is because anytime you work with sphagnum moss, it's very important that you wear them because sometimes the microscopic barbs that are on it will have spores, and spores get in your skin and cause all kinds of problems. So it's always best to wear very, very light, thin gloves. That's all you need for protection and still allow you to work with your plant. Now, sphagnum moss comes dry and it comes in a bale. So what you have to do is you put it in a container with water, let it soak for a while, and then pull it apart. This has already been pulled apart to save time, but basically you have to get, it comes all pressed together. And so break it apart so it's nice and loose. And you take a bit of the sphagnum moss and you put it around the roots of the plant. And the reason we do this is a couple of reasons. It helps protect it. And in nature, there's a lot of moss on the trees that the plant is living on, so it simulates even closer to the way the plant is. Then what we're going to do is we're going to put the plant onto the mount in the position that we want it, like this. And then we start to slowly wrap this stuff around. And don't be afraid to use too much. It's very important that you wrap it snugly. The first priority of any plant that lives on a tree or on a rock is to firmly embed itself into the thing so it doesn't fall off and end up on the floor of the rainforest where there is no sunlight. So it's going to work very hard to anchor itself. That's the first thing it's going to do. If it spends all of its time growing roots, it's not going to grow leaves. If it doesn't grow leaves, it's not going to store up food, so it'll never flower for you. Okay, now I've got this tied down fairly well.
Paul, did you soak the sphagnum?
I soaked the sphagnum, for about 10, 15 minutes before I used it. I did that before I came home today. And then when you've got it where you want it, and you cut the fish line around the back here, and then we're going to tie a knot. And this is always the most difficult part. We're going to tie a knot here to hold it to its hold it down so that, of course, it stays on the bark and doesn't fall off. I always tie a couple of knots. Okay. Now we just cut off the loose ends. Now the plant is mounted. Now you're going to want to hang this somewhere or put it up somewhere. So what we do is you get a piece of wire. Now the wire should be made out of steel or some other white metal. Don't use copper, not even copper wire that's been insulated. Copper can be deadly to plants, and so we don't want to cause any trouble. Just cut off a nice piece.
Paul, would a coat hanger wire work?
Yeah, the coat hanger wire would probably work just fine. Then you give it sort of an L shape. Now I've already pre-drilled holes in this thing just to make things easier. So I put it through the hole like this. Makes this way. Then I'm going to bend it over like this. And I just take a plier and put a couple of twists in it so that it stays on like that. And then I just twist this in the middle like that. And there's your hook. And this is what your plant will look like. Remove some of the excess moss, and you're all set to go. And after a while, the plant will literally grow into the bark, and it will then probably not need to be held anymore. Eventually, the sphagnum moss will sort of disintegrate and disappear, but by that time, the plant has already built itself into the mount, so it'll be fine. Another kind of plant that's really good for this are bromeliads. Bromeliads come in a couple of different forms. This is a tank type, what we call a tank type bromeliad. In the center here is a well, it's like a tank. It's a little hole or center spot that holds water. And in the rainforest, and also there's a whole ecosystem that lives in that little pool of water. But what you want to do with one of these is when you mount it, you want to mount it so that the tank is always pointing upward. That way you can put water into it. Bromeliads don't get much water from their roots. Roots are merely to anchor the plant into the tree or whatever it's living on. So with this one, I'm going to use a piece of tree fern bark, called a cylinder fiber. And what it does is it provides a very flexible yet and fine thing, so the roots can really dig into it. And we're going to do basically the same thing with this. And I will first make a loop. And this isn't always too easy to do with gloves. Okay. Then the loop will be placed on. Now, bromeliads don't necessarily require having sphagnum moss, but it looks nice. And it gives you a nice mounting point. So I'm just going to take a little of the sphagnum moss again. I'm going to put it over the base of the bromeliad. Now, if I plant it this way, it looks pretty good. And basically, the tank is in a vertical position. Let's set the leaves properly. I'm going to do the same thing over again. I'm going to take it, pull it tight, and just wrap it around. Now, bromeliads don't have a lot of roots, so you may want to go up and over the first few leaves of the plant so that it stays snug. Eventually, it'll grow new leaves, and we'll be fine. Now, you can see it's tied down. It won't go anywhere. And I cut it off. I'll take it around and put a knot. And just the same as I did before. This is a little finer form of tree fern bark than I usually use, but it'll work just fine. And it makes for a very nice little mount. It's just a little bit too far. This is very hard to do with gloves sometimes.
It's different mountains.
There we go. And now it's mounted, not as well as I like. Okay. Now it's carefully mounted. You got it in there right. The moss is in front, covers over a lot of the fishing line. And again, I'm going to make same type of hanger. Now, if you want to mount this onto like a nail or something like that, what you do is just take a loop of the fishing line and run it through a hole in the mount. And run it through the hole like that. Again, we bring it around.
I'm honestly so impressed that you're doing this as quick as you are. I thought this is going to be really involved.
When you do
You're
it,
making it look easy.
when you do it for a living, you get pretty quick.
Yeah,
at
I
it.
guess you've probably done it a few times before.
Mhm. And it'll mount just like it, the other one did.
Mhm.
And you can pour, all you have to do to water these, so sprinkle, you can spray water on the bark, but also be sure to put water in the center of the tank. The tank is very, very important. Now, a lot of people think that Talansias are different from bromeliads. Actually, Talansias are a subset of bromeliad. Now, this is a piece of chala, and this allows you to do a whole lot of different things. Chala has a lot of holes in it. If you have small little Tillandsias, you can just mount them in the holes. You can fill this up with sphagnum moss and tie the bottom so it doesn't fall out, and then just poke them in the holes. You can put a whole lot of them on one of these things, and it gets very interesting. Or you can take one like this. Now, Tillandsias don't have tanks. The way that the Tillandsia gets water is as it rains, there are little scales, and they're almost impossible to see all along the leaves. And the scales draw up the water and hold the water for the plant. And so when you water these, make sure that you water the whole plant. Spray water over all of the leaves, and that way it will have the water that it needs. Also, if you fertilize these things, it's probably best to use fine mist from a sprayer, and you're going to have to feed it. There is no food on these mounts, or no food value, I should say. So what you're going to have to do is quarter strength fertilizer is fine, and just occasionally give them a spritz of that, and that'll give them the food they need to grow. In the rainforest, they would get leaf matter from dying leaves, bird droppings, and other things to provide the food, which aren't going to be the case when we do these things at home. So again, I'm going to start the slip knot. Now, this is a nice big piece, and because it's a nice big piece, what you can do is actually mount more than one to it. You could mount 3 or 4 plants on it on different sides. Now, what I'm going to do is run it around the center. Now you have to separate all of the different pups. These are shoots separate from one another. Get in there. Get the leaves out of the way. And you get it in very tightly. That a few times. Now, the thing with bromeliads is they are what we call monocarp. They grow, they flower, and then they die. The nice thing about them is before they die, they will produce a number of pups, which are little baby offshoots. And the offshoots are very nice because you can, when they reach about the third the size of the parent plant, you can take them off and start a whole new plant. Now, I've got this tied down, and you can see it's covering only one side of the bark. So you can put a trolley here. So you can actually put another 2 or 3 plants on it, and then tie it down again. And of course, it's easy to mount because you just put a strainer with it through one of the holes in the trolley.
So we don't need sphagnum for the Tillandsias?
Not really, because see, their roots are strictly for anchoring the plant to the mount. They're not taking up any water. I mount a lot of my Talansias and even my bromeliads without the sphagnum moss. When you buy sphagnum moss, make sure it's New Zealand sphagnum moss. And it will say so on the package. New Zealand sphagnum moss holds up better, has less weeds, and it's just a better all-around product. And if it's New Zealand, it'll say, it's kind of like 100% blue agave tequila. If it is, it'll say it. So make sure that when you buy it, it's a good quality moss, because otherwise you're going to have nothing but trouble, and it's going to break down on you and rot and cause all kinds of trouble. Okay, now we've mounted our Tillandsias straight onto the chala.
Can you show us the pups?
Okay, each of these is a pup. See, each of these shoots is a pup. The mother plant grew and it flowered. It died and it produced all these. Well, the dead, they cut the dead mother plant, but she made all of these little pups. Now you could take one of these, break it off, and just poke it in one of the holes. And something like this, if you want, you could actually do it in 3 dimensions. You put another plant here, another plant here. If they're very small pups like these are, you could put a whole bunch of them on here and they'll grow through and look very, very nice. If you have a bromeliad and it hasn't flowered for you in a couple of years, and you really want to make it flower, get a slice of apple, put it in a plastic bag with the plant, and don't put it in the sun or anything. You don't want to cook the plant, and leave it in there for a couple of weeks. And often that will encourage them to flower. So normally,
that's good information.
yeah, a lot of people like that. And you get kind of, you just, the flowers on bromeliads are very, very interesting. The colors are very bright. The flowers are usually very small, but they're very, very interesting. So you want to do that. Now, I've talked mostly about chala and tree fern, but there's no limit to this. You can be as creative as you want. You have something like this, you can mount a whole lot of little plants all around it. Make a very interesting mount. You can also mount on something like this, if you wanted to. You put this down and attach the plants to this, and they'll grow out for you. I have seen orchids mounted on tennis rackets. Hang a tennis racket upside down and you attach the plants to it. There is really no limit to doing this. Another thing you can do is with these Talansias is you can hot melt glue them to the mirror in your bathroom. And the steam from taking showers and so on will provide all of the water that they need, and they'll look very nice there. You can also mount them onto trees in your garden. And this is what I do a lot of. I like to grow bromeliads on my trees, and they get huge and they climb all over the tree. And a lot of times the tree will have not much going on down below, just be bare branches. You can just attach plants there with cable ties or with this fishing line. I don't like to use string because it rots. And then you just tie it, and it will grow along the tree and provide interest in the part of the tree that's kind of bare.
Paul, how cold a temperature can the typical bromeliads handle?
I was just about to get to that. I live in San Francisco. And of course, I have no trouble growing them there because the climate's mild, quite different from like Santa Rosa or Concord. It doesn't take much searching on Google to look up the different bromeliads and find out ones that will exist in the temperature span of your area. They will take light frosts, a lot of them, not all of them. The highland ones are what you're looking for because they can tolerate lower temperatures. When you mount them in the tree, and as all epiphytes are, there's always branches and leaves above them, so they want indirect light. They don't want the sun to beat on them. And then all the care you have to do is to spray them with a hose every once in a while. But do see if they'll tolerate the maximum temperature you have, because they'll tolerate it, a lot of them up into the 90s or so. But when you start getting over 100, it's a little tough on them. If you have an exceptionally hot day, the best thing to do is to water it 2 or 3 times and try to keep it as moist as possible and see if it'll be okay on a hot day. Now, another thing that people love to mount are staghorn ferns. And the staghorn fern is pretty simple to mount. What you do is you have your mount, and have a substantial one for that because they get big. You just take a little ball of this sphagnum moss and put it between the mount and the plant, and then just tie it down in the way that I showed you, and they will get big. And I do grow those outdoors on my trees in San Francisco, and they don't seem to mind it. I think they don't like the cooler temperatures too much. They don't want to get down into the frost level very much. But it is a very attractive plant, and it will grow very successfully for you. Now, another thing that we have to do is you have to get the supplies for this. And there's some things that that you'll find are easy to get. Fishing line, for instance, you can get at a hardware store. They sell it for hanging pictures. You can get it in a bait shop. It's fishing line, and you know that is not a difficult thing to get. The bark and everything is often sold in garden stores like Slow Deer, and they have some very nice cholla here. They have the cork bark. They sell driftwood, which is a very nice thing. You can get all kinds of really nice arrangements on a piece of driftwood, and so you can find things like that at the garden stores. Also, a lot of times those things like the tree fern and even the orchid bark and the bark you can get at any place that sells supplies for reptiles. And because the vivariums and terrariums that they live in are often decorated with this stuff. And also turtles like to climb on floating pieces of cork. And so if you go to a store that provides those kind of supplies, you'll find a lot of things that will be very interesting for it. Also, you can just go along the beach, find a thing, or if you're pruning a hardwood tree, you find a nice stick, you can mount to that. It's infinite the possibilities you can do with this. So that's about the main part of this talk. If you have an interest in this and you have any questions, I will be at the Pacific Orchid Exposition which is put on by the San Francisco Orchid Society. And there I'll be at the Orchid Doctor booth on the days that we're having the show, which is February 25th through 27th. If I'm not there, somebody else will be. And we'll be glad to answer your questions about orchids or mounting them. And we know a little bit about bromeliads too. It's at the Hall of Flowers in Golden Gate Park, and runs from 10 to 5 every day. And if you come by and ask me questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them. If you aren't going to make it to the show, my email is Paul Bourbin, that's PaulBourbin @hotmail.com. And you're very welcome to come and send me an email, and I'll try to answer your questions for you. If you have a problem with a plant, send me a picture. We'll see what we can do. And I think that's about it. Are there any questions?
That's amazing, Paul. Thank you so much. I can't believe you just put together 3 different arrangements in under 30 minutes. So I'm super impressed. We do have a couple questions. One was regarding the sphagnum. I don't know how you would do it, but somebody asked if you can if you need to sterilize the sphagnum before you use it, or does it come sterilized, or I don't know.
It doesn't come sterilized. And a lot of people do. I never have. I've never, but if you want to sterilize it to make sure there's no pathogens in it, just put it in boiling water for maybe 10 minutes or so, and that'll kill anything living on it. And then it's perfectly safe to use. You have to moisten it anyway, so it's not a problem. Any other questions?
Yeah, and then just regarding care, if and I guess light, so light and watering and whatnot. I think you said that you will need to water them a bit more. Are they more sensitive to light, or do you have to? Do they tend to be a little bit more vulnerable in this when they're mounted, or not?
Okay, we're used to growing plants in pots, and the pot provides a shield around the roots of the plant, so it holds water in and holds moisture in better. When you have a plant that's on a mount, its roots are exposed to the air, and our houses tend to be a little bit drier, and our outside is usually drier than it is in the rainforest. So the mount dries out very quickly, and so you have to water every day. in places where these plants grow naturally, it rains just about every day, and then the water goes away, the sun comes out, and the breezes, and so the plant is used to being watered just about every day. And what you're simulating here is how live in a natural rainforest. So it's best to water them almost every day. You can just take a hand spray bottle and just spray it with water, and occasionally diluted fertilizer, or you can. Some people dunk them in water. That works, but you have to be careful, because if there's any pathogens on the first plant that goes into the water, the next one may get them as well. As far as light is concerned, we're talking about epiphytes here. Remember, there's always leaves and the branches and other plants growing around them. So they're used to getting bright light. Light is very bright. It's mottled. It's not pounding on the plant. It's not hard direct sunlight. And so that's what you want to do. You want to give them bright light, but not direct sunlight where they get burned. Like when you're sitting in a window where the sun is streaming through, it gets awfully hot. They don't like that. They also like air movement. If they're doing them outside, that's pretty simple. If you're inside, make sure they get a little bit of air circulation around them. They really, really like that. Also, spraying them daily brings up the humidity, and they really like the humidity. So that's basically the basic care. Do make sure wherever you're growing this plant that you're giving it the temperature range that it lives in. Plants do not do well outside of a certain temperature range at all. And they do like the temperature to drop a bit at night. Of course, if you're growing them outside, that's not a problem. But inside, they do like the temperature to drop so that the dark photosynthetic reaction can occur. So does that answer the question?
Yes, very well. You've mentioned watering and how you just spray the plants daily. Do you ever just take the whole thing and like soak it for 10 minutes or something?
No, you never have to soak them long. Remember, these are not aquatic plants. But yeah, you can, if you want to dump them in a container of water, you can do that. And after a few minutes, a few seconds actually, you'll start to see that the color of the leaves of Talansians and so forth will turn a different color, because those scales have absorbed the water. They just need to be soaked for a few seconds, really, not very long. You don't have to do it that way, but that is one way. Just be careful that you're not spreading any pathogens that way. That's why the use of a spray bottle is often the preferred way. And of course, this means you're taking a commitment. You have to take this plant from wherever you're hanging it, if it's in your house, and you have to move it to some place where you can water it, because you don't want to get your walls all wet and gooey. So that's part of the lore, I guess you'd say, of growing mounted plants.
Paul, with beech driftwood, do you need to treat the driftwood to get rid of the salts?
It's always a good idea. Anything that's been near the ocean, like coral or anything, just rinse it off really well, soak it if you have to in a bucket, and change the water a couple of times, or really spray a good amount of water on it, so that all of the salt and sand and grit and anything else that might be on the piece of wood has a chance to dissipate. Also, you can take that piece of driftwood and put it out in the sun on the cup for a couple of days, where it's nice and warm, and turn it over and do the other side, and that'll make sure that there's that it's dry and nothing is living on it, which is very important. You don't want to import any fungus and other stuff. Any other questions?
Sorry, I was on mute. What would you say? So the ones that you just made right now, how long can they stay on that mount before you have to upgrade, or do you?
I've seen things on mounts done properly for years.
Oh.
The only time you have to worry about it is if that piece of wood or whatever it's mounted on starts to rot. Obviously, you're going to have to change it, or if it grows too big for the mount. These plants will get big and get bigger, hopefully. And if they ever get too big for the mount, then what you have to do is you have to remount it. Now, that's a very difficult thing sometimes, because if the roots have dug in to the mount, you're going to wreck the roots pulling the plant off of the original mount. So what some people will do is they'll leave the plant on the original mount if it's in good shape, and they'll just remount that onto a bigger piece of mounting material. and tie it all together, and that way it will it'll go for a much longer time. But that's one of the advantages too of mounting. You don't have to change the mix every couple of years like you do when you plant them in pots.
Well, I'm definitely inspired. I'm going to do this myself. You've made it look really easy. And I think it's super cool too, that you can use a lot of vertical space and pack in more plants, as needed. I really appreciate your time and your expertise. And I hope everybody has a good rest of your Saturday. It's a nice day out. You know, you can make your Tillandsia or orchid arrangement and go hang it outside on a nice tree outside and enjoy it. So thanks so much, Paul. And I really appreciate, like you said, your time and expertise, and Dan behind the camera too. Thanks everyone. Have a good day.
My pleasure.